Hey Jimmy, it's so nice to have you on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to some insights that you have. A lot of my guests know you as a writer. You've written multiple books. One of the ones that you wrote most recently, Fiat Ruins Everything, and I completely agree with your sentiment in that. Great, yeah, awesome book. I completely agree with your sentiment on that. I do think that Fiat ruins everything, and something that I was looking at today. So something that I was just looking at this website, priced in Bitcoin 21, and I saw that the price of a house dropped for the first time ever to below 5 Bitcoin. Before this, the low was about 6.41 Bitcoin. So we can see that here, the low in the last cycle. Why do you think this is? And what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's just showing that Bitcoin's a better store of value than a house, right? And the
Yeah.
houses have been, traditionally the place where a lot of Americans have stored their value because the dollar sucks so much. Stocks are the other store of value, and what this is showing is that even something that's a good store of value, houses are getting cheaper in Bitcoin terms. And this is true of also gold, of stocks, and it just shows the superiority of Bitcoin because of its finite supply. Houses are, um, being made all the time. I would say there's actually a large glut of houses as a result of its store of value premium. For example, a lot of people know about the ghost cities in China, but there are lots of ghost buildings in the United States. So near Central Park are all these luxury condos. They're about 20 or 30% occupied, which is kind of
Wow.
surprising if you know about how desirable that real estate is. But a lot of foreign nationals and people that are trying to store value and not have it be devalued from them, particularly rich people, they tend to buy these properties and just sit on them. No renters, nothing, just keep them there. So in that sense, what we're seeing is that Bitcoin is a much better store of value, and in Bitcoin terms, houses come down. So it's showing its superiority, and that's what that chart means to me.
Yeah, and I think that what the point that you made, I actually didn't know that only 20 to 30% of those condos, those luxury condos are occupied. And that's actually scary to me because if you really think about it, how much would the price of those condos drop if
Hmm.
suddenly the people who own them dropped the rental prices? I mean, maybe they can't even afford to do it because the property
Hmm.
taxes are so high, the cost to maintain those properties is so high. So what do you think is going to be the future of housing on a Bitcoin standard?
Well, there's a significant store value premium, right?
Yeah.
And this tweet that I sent out like a couple days ago. It might have been a tweet, it might have been on some other platform. I don't remember. But the main thing that you have to recognize about housing and stocks in particular is that they are Fed-backed stores of value, right? So when they come down, the Fed has an incentive to go and prop them back up because so many loans are against those assets. So, in 2008, obviously, we had the great financial crisis, and the Fed stepped in and started buying mortgage-backed securities to keep the housing market more robust than it would have been otherwise. Similarly, we had different stock market pull downs, and that's drawdowns, and that's when the Fed usually acts to lower interest rates so that, or bail them out directly or whatever, to keep the stock prices high. And people sort of understand this, which is why so many people keep their assets in stocks or real estate as their store of value, especially rich people. But as we get on a more Bitcoin standard and people realize charts like the one that you just showed, they're going to start, uh, you know, taking Bitcoin a lot more seriously and say, well, why am I paying real estate taxes on this? Why am I, paying condo or home association fees and, I have to go and fix things and, I have to be essentially a landlord in order to keep this property. Like, why am I doing that instead of just putting it in Bitcoin? It's anyone if you know anyone that like manages property, it's more or less a full-time job. It's not
Yeah.
easy. So doing keeping it in Bitcoin is a lot simpler and better, like sort of on a yearly basis, as far as your annual returns go on a dollar basis. So why would you do that? So the store of value premium, I think, reduces, especially as you get those luxury condos near Central Park that are like 20 or 30% occupied, like off the market. If I mean, there's always a market for those for people at the right price, but they're so asset inflated, and I think most housing is asset inflated significantly, that as people move to these other things, then people are going to then the prices of those things come down. They have less of a store of value premium, and there's not as much demand for them. Now that's a bad thing if you own lots of houses, I guess, but it's also a good thing because it doesn't go to the people that are using it as an investment vehicle. It goes to the people that actually want to live in them, right? That want to use it for what it's meant for, which is a place to, sleep and live and raise children and things like that. So ultimately, I think it means that you get a much healthier housing economy, and that means that people are more able to have children. For example, housing is a major reason why so many people are reluctant to have children because they don't think they can afford a house and so on. So as that store premium goes away, we get a lot healthier in terms of how much money as a society we put into housing, which is currently a tremendous amount. It's one of the few things that keep getting produced in the United States. But that and all that ends up being a good thing because the goods go to the people that will use them.
Yeah, and have you considered that? Of course, of course you've considered this, but the cost of producing houses drops over time. The real cost,
Mm.
the
Hmm.
nominal cost of producing obviously increases, but the real cost, the time that goes into it, the effort, the energy, the number of people who have to actually put in their labor into building a house, that actually decreases over time because of technology. And over
Mm.
time, of course, this is going to make the price of housing decrease because the supply is going to increase. As I mean, I think most people expect this. Most people just don't see it. Actually, most people don't expect this. Most people don't see this coming at all. I think Bitcoiners are pretty
Mm.
much the only ones that do expect this. And I think I mean, in a lot of your content, you're talking about how Bitcoin makes life cheaper.
Mm.
Bitcoin, living on a Bitcoin standard, saving in Bitcoin is one of the best things that you can do. Can you actually dig a little deeper? I want to dig a little deeper with you on you mentioned
Mm.
how people can't have kids. Can you make the
Mm.
connection with how that relates to Bitcoin?
Yeah. So people want to have kids. A lot of married couples do. But the big hurdle for them is that they feel like they can't afford it. Right? It used to
Yeah.
be that you lived on a farm, you had 50 acres. You can pop out as many kids. Like they're a value add because they help you managing the farm and so on. But currently in the modern society that we live in, um, you don't have big houses, so people don't feel like they can afford children. So that's a major one because real estate is expensive, and unless you have two really good jobs, right, for the mother and father, it's not going to be very viable, especially because jobs don't pay that well. Largely because a lot of manufacturing has gone away, and there's lots of reasons. But the affordability is the main thing, and that means that only the very rich people can really afford to have children, or the very poor people that are sort of government subsidized through welfare and such. So all those people in the middle, they're just sort of like squeezed out, like many things in the fiat economy. Um, and they don't have children, and they don't even want to think about having children. Instead, they go and do other stuff rather than doing trying to have a family and so on. So that ultimately is decivilizing because birth rates plummet, and you go past the point of no return. And there are many countries in the world right now In fact, there's only a handful that are above the, replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman. So it's kind of, these are the fiat sins that we have to kind of pay for. But what's encouraging is that a lot of people on a Bitcoin standard are significantly more likely to have children. Now, part of that is they seem to have a lot more optimism for the future. If you think the future is going to be worse, you're not going to bring children into the world. And if you know anyone, from in the last 4 years that suffered through COVID but didn't have Bitcoin in their life, most of them are pretty depressed, right? Like they had a really rough time, and they don't have necessarily a very good projection of the future. They have really no hope. So they're much less likely to have children. Whereas if you have some hope for the future, if you have savings, if you can plan, then you're much more likely to have children. So ultimately, it comes down to not having good savings vehicles, not being able to plan. The uncertainty around the future significantly decreases the likelihood of people having children, and we're seeing all this bear out in the stats.
I think that you also make the connection with how I don't want to make this a religious
Hmm.
podcast, but
Hmm.
I know you've made the connection between church and Bitcoin, how churches can save they
Hmm.
can save in Bitcoin instead of having to
Hmm.
save in real estate, instead of having to sell off chunks of land in order to pay for their expenses, they can save in Bitcoin and they can even sell some of that Bitcoin if they need to. Can you go into that?
Yeah, so a lot of churches, like at least in the United States, the main asset that they have, the main store of value that they have is their land, right? And a lot of churches end up becoming landlords. Now, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with being a landlord. That's a perfectly fine occupation, but that's not necessarily something great for a church, right? Like you don't, your sort of goal as a church is to have a community and bring more people into your religion and so on. But what's happened is that most churches have actually become real estate managers, especially ones that have been around a long time, that haven't sort of gone bankrupt. Um, my argument to churches has been like, don't store your wealth in real estate, like go
Yeah.
store it in Bitcoin, right? Like it's a better store of value. You don't a lot of churches I know, like once attendance drops, they start bringing in a preschool to the church to run during the week so they can get a little additional income. They rent out their churches on Saturday so for weddings and so on, so they can get some extra income. Or if it comes to it, then they might sell off parcels of the land, and that's completely sort of like normal progression of churches, which I find incredibly sad because they're not doing what they were meant to, that or their intention was when they built that building.
They're basically
It was meant to.
regressing.
Yeah, they're going backwards, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you get and there's no real impetus for change because you have this additional income, and a lot of them end up graying out. Like just only have older congregants, can't attract new ones, and it's a sad situation. And I think if you had a better store of value, if you, and I mean, that's not the only problem with a lot of churches. There's, doctrinal things and things like that. But this is one part of it, is that, they're not storing their value very well, and they're not managing their endowments very well because, I mean, a lot of them end up like, if they have an endowment, like putting it into stocks and things, which make it very complicated. Now you're not just a landlord, you're also an investment manager. It's not what churches are good at, and I think it would be better if people did what they were good at.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Have you seen I was actually just gonna pull something up on my
Mhm.
Google, but have you seen even McDonald's? They say that they're a real estate business. They're not even a burger business. They're a real estate business, which to me it just blows my mind because who sees McDonald's as a, a real estate business? Nobody. Only the people who are digging, only the people who are digging under the I guess the facade.
Mm,
They realize that McDonald's doesn't even make. I mean, of course, their burger business is profitable,
hmm
but
hmm
the majority of their profits are coming from owning real estate and lending out that real estate to other people, right? And that's just
hmm
it's just change. I think it's just completely. Uh, I think it's completely destroyed society, and of course, that's the root cause of that is fiat. The root cause of that is the fact that they can't continue to earn money from their burger business and sustain the business because the fiat that they have keeps losing value.
Mm. Yeah, well, it's not that they're just a real estate company. That's
Right,
very
right, right.
much true. But pretty much every Fortune 500 company, they're all banks, like
Yeah.
whether you know it or not. And I wrote an article, one of the chapters in the book is about airlines, and I did a deep dive into the whole airline industry. Turns out that there are actually more banks that use flights to discharge their debt than they are airlines that use banking services. And we found this out during the pandemic when they needed a loan from investment banks. And the investment banks didn't want their giant planes or anything, or whatever assets they had. The thing that they wanted was their mileage programs
Wow. Yeah.
as collateral. And
Yeah.
that's because they can essentially issue new miles whenever they want. So they're sort of their own mini central bank that use those that sell those miles to credit card companies and so on, and that's way more profitable. The value of the mileage program was greater than the market cap of the airlines themselves, at least the way the investment banks valued them. And this is just one example, but like what airlines are they're banks that issue airline miles and to different places, and they discharge them through flights, right? So flights are almost secondary. And that's
Wow.
not the only one. There are lots of other businesses, right?
Starbucks.
Yeah, Starbucks is another big one. Like a large part of the balance on their gift cards they have in a bank account, and they invest that and they try to get yield from that, and that ends up being more profitable than their actual coffee business to some degree. For a while there, GMAC financing, this was before their bankruptcy in 2008. They were making more money off the GMAC financing arm. The GM, the car company, was making more money from the GMAC financing arm than they were from making cars, right? Like everyone's a bank, right?
Yeah.
And this is the fiat game that you can play. Even McDonald's, they get the real estate through loans, so that this is enabled through fiat money. But the actual franchise owners, a lot of them they just get loans from the Small Business Administration. They're actually one of the biggest users of the small business loan program, and they're able to create money out of nothing and create more McDonald's franchises. This is all over the economy. Like, name me a Fortune 500 company, and I will show you exactly how they benefit from fiat money and why that's a much larger part of the profit that they make than the actual goods or services. And in fact, like we saw that we've seen this with a lot of zombie companies. So IBM, for example, used to manufacture computers, right? Like this used to be their main business. They used to make laptops. Lenovo was, before it was named Lenovo, it was like IBM ThinkPad or whatever. And they sold off that part of the business because it wasn't profitable enough. It was much more profitable to do services and things like that, which is essentially Fortune 500 CEOs like trading things or whatever. And they have one of the largest patent portfolios in the world, so they can go around sort of being a patent troll if need be. Like this is they're no longer manufacturing anything, and they've unsurprisingly become a zombie company. And a company like Oracle, they live off of sort of software they sold years ago, and they just a lot of large companies can't get out of them because they don't have the engineers to go and re-architect systems and all that. Like it's all grifty, and that's what this economy is like. And there's loans behind it. If there are any loans in any part of the chain, then it's fiat money that's enabling all of it.
That's pretty much it. I think you explained it really well there. I also think that there's a connection to be made with planned obsolescence and how
Mm,
companies need constant cash flows. They need
mm,
customers to keep coming to them because otherwise they can't survive. On the other hand, let's say if okay, so let's say you make your books. You write your
mm,
books, you accept fiat currencies versus you accept Bitcoin for them. So if you accept Bitcoin, you can literally make the book once whatever income you get upfront, you can store that in Bitcoin and that'll probably last you a very long time, which I
mm,
think is the way that it should be because you create your value, you get it out there as soon as you possibly can, rather than continuously having to like in the case of let's say Apple, for example.
mm,
Apple, I mean, I genuinely think that they hold off on updates because they need another iPhone that they need to sell. If they don't,
mm.
then they can't make more money and they can't be the biggest business in the world. Have you considered that? Have you thought of the impact that Bitcoin could have on planned obsolescence and just the way that things are today?
Yeah, and the planned obsolescence and like I think more generally like sort of going into more services than like products, right? Like
Yeah.
everybody wants to become a SaaS company. And
Yeah.
that's a way to get recurring revenue because they have all these loans that they have to service, and this ends up being like sort of like an efficient way to make sure that you're able to service those loans. It's a symptom of a bigger problem, which is that people use loans to build rather than savings to build, and that's the big difference. If you use loans to build, it's usually somebody else's money, and you're not as careful about spending it, particularly VC money, right? If you get VC money, they pressure you hard to get to a certain size so you can you can essentially become a bank at some point and use that to make make money the only real way you can in a fiat economy instead of producing goods and services because that the unicorn method of making money is through loans of some kind and leveraging that in some way or holding dollars for people at some point in the chain or something like that. That ends up being the thing that everyone wants companies to become at a certain scale instead of producing goods and services. So, uh, that sort of loan-based building, debt-based building, is very destructive because a lot of these debt-based building projects just don't work out, and that's a tremendous waste in the economy. So, VCs like to tell you that, okay, yeah, 90% of our portfolio companies, they're going to die within like 5 years or something. But it's the 10% that, that goes up that's going to save the fund or whatever. But if you think about it, that's a lot of resources wasted, right? Like all these, programmers that you have to pay, the real estate in San Francisco, all the, computers that you bought and all this other stuff, you've just wasted, a significant amount of capital that could have gone towards something that was actually useful. And that's the real sort of destructiveness of debt. Because if you saved instead, right? If it was somebody that stored their value and then started, they'd be a lot more careful. They wouldn't just go and spend, $1 million on a few programmers and let's see if we can work. They would make sure there was a market for it first, that they could turn a profit early and so on because I mean it's their money on the line. So this debt-based building is the problem, and that's encouraged in every way, shape, and form in a fiat economy. Even people that have money, right? They
Yeah.
would rather go into debt, right? They would rather keep assets. Most rich people don't keep a lot of cash. They usually keep land, stock, stuff like that. And when they need cash, they go get loans with that as collateral, right? They'll say, okay, well, I need to. Put in $1 million for this VC fund as a capital call. let's just get a loan for my house in the Hamptons.
Hmm.
Now let's go and use that $1 million. It's all printed out of nothing, and it keeps expanding the money supply. It steals from everybody, and it's ultimately mostly destroyed in these endeavors.
Yeah. I think that gives us a perfect segue into I actually wanted to refer to one of your tweets. I wanted you to
Mhm.
just go a little deeper into this. So the tweet is about I'm not sure if you're ready for this, but I want you to talk about altcoins, why people shouldn't fall for the altcoin scams in this cycle. And I think you're great to explain that because you've done a deep dive. I see your emails. You talk about well, you talk about avoiding altcoins. You talk about
Mhm.
just on your Twitter, on your other podcasts, you talk about it. Can you tell my audience why? Just, I mean, again, we can make the connection where VCs are taking on debt to buy these altcoins. Can you go into that?
Yeah, well, so altcoins are sort of like the copycat of Bitcoin, right? And they're trying very hard to associate themselves with Bitcoin because Bitcoin has done so well. And the argument is always, well, we're a better Bitcoin or we're like Bitcoin. The association has to be strong. And I fault VCs, a lot of tech journalists and the media in general with conflating the two. But the thing is, they're very, very different. There's
Yeah.
one that is decentralized, has no controller, and then there's everything else, which has a controller, has people that pump it or control it, or can change the emission schedule, or have a large pre-mine or whatever, or control the software. They're all centralized in some way, shape, or form. So they're very different animals, but they've been conflated together by the people that have a financial incentive to do so, particularly VCs, particularly tech journalists and media, because for various reasons. But ultimately, what happens is that a lot of people, when they're getting in, they get confused by this conflation and think, oh, well, it's the same thing. I'll just buy Litecoin because it's Bitcoin but cheaper, or I'll buy Ethereum because it has this feature or that feature or whatever. And it's just kind of like, what are you doing? Like what
Yeah.
like there's something real, and there's all these copycats that are completely unreal. But that's unfortunately the path that a lot of people take because there aren't that many great resources that people encounter on a regular basis. And there are plenty of books that explain this stuff, but the initial impression that a lot of people get are usually through mainstream media or VCs or some altcoin price pumping podcast or something like that. And that's where people enter this space, and oftentimes, they lose all their money, and then they never discover Bitcoin, and they're just sort of sad the rest of the way. Or
Yeah.
if they might get into the sort of like path that I laid out in this tweet, where you know, okay, like there's a lot of scamminess, and then they recognize it, and then eventually they realize, okay, yeah, Bitcoin's the only thing that's actually useful. And I've seen a lot of people come down that path. They used to dabble in altcoins or whatever, and maybe they have some Bitcoin, and they realize over like a period of 5 years, oh, most of my stuff went down 90%, but Bitcoin keeps going up. I don't like, even that's enough to question. Okay, yeah, something is very different here, and eventually they come back to Bitcoin. So. Um, that's the normal path that a lot of people take. Hopefully, if there are any viewers of this podcast that are getting in now, they can save themselves a lot of heartache and just get into Bitcoin and not worry about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is also the unit bias. They see
Mm-hmm.
that Bitcoin is what $85,000 a coin,
Mm-hmm.
and how they want to own a whole Bitcoin. I've actually had conversations about this with people who are saying to me, "Oh, I can't afford a whole Bitcoin. I don't want fractions. So I'm just going to buy Ethereum because Ethereum is still $3,000. And eventually, because they're basically the same thing, right? They're basically going to solve the same problem. So eventually Ethereum should catch up, right? Ethereum should be at $90,000 a coin, right? 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 But then it never happens. right?
Yeah,
It never
yeah. I mean,
happens.
it's kind of like saying, there's the U.S. dollar and the Lebanese pound. They're the same thing, right? Like, I
Yeah,
can go get Lebanese pounds. Yeah, except it's hyperinflating. I don't think that's a great idea, right? Like
yeah,
they have different monetary policies. The thing about Bitcoin that you know is that you know its monetary policy
yeah,
forevermore because it's decentralized and it is extremely difficult to change it. In fact, it requires consensus, which is very, very unlikely for that particular feature. So, whereas Ethereum has changed its monetary policy 31 times, and every other crypto has, like pre-mines and all these other sort of central banky levers to change things. So
yeah,
you have to understand that the big difference is centralized versus decentralized, and decentralized is the play here. And instead of playing it like a stock portfolio, which I think a lot of people come in with that mentality as well, thinking, "Oh, I need to diversify or whatever." Um, that's the wrong mentality. Under the gold standard, people save their money in gold. It's only because of fiat money itself starting with the Federal Reserve that people felt the need to diversify. And it really accelerated in the 70s because the dollar was debasing so quickly that, people, wanted lots of different places to store value. Largely because if you kept it all in one stock and the CEO embezzles the money, then you're kind of out of luck or whatever. This isn't like that. This is this is more like gold, and that's how you have to think of it. And it takes a lot of cognitive load off. It's actually better for you just to set it and forget it rather than, which one's going to pump next week. And at least these days, it's not even about the tech anymore. It's gone like very full retard into meme coins and such where you really have to pay attention to where the market signals are going and stuff. It's more akin to gambling than
yeah.
anything else. So you want to gamble, yeah, sure, be my guest, go do it. But if you're saving, then use Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have wealth that you want to pass on to your kids, don't buy meme coins with it. And I mean, pretty much anything that you save, if you want it to be around when you're, let's say 5 years from now, you want to put it in Bitcoin because you don't want to have to worry about your money all the time. You don't want to have to think about, oh, will this be around when I need it? Because I think a lot of altcoin, meme coin fanatics, they don't see it that way. They think that if I buy this coin, it will be around in 10 years. I'll be able to hold on to it for a very long time, and eventually I'll be able to liquidate it and I'll be able to get back my value. But they're never going to be able to do that. In real terms, these coins are not keeping up. And they just don't quite get it. I don't think they quite get
Mhm.
it yet. Eventually
Well,
they will.
if you're buying a meme coin, what are you actually expecting, right? Like it's because they're all pump and dumps. They have
Yeah.
no purported value. It's all literally based around the meme, and if they think that it's even going to be around a year from now, let alone like 5 or 10 years, I think they need to have their head examined because look at
Yeah.
the meme coins from like a couple of years ago. There were so many. I mean, a few have survived, granted. I think Shibu Inu and things like that. But there's a large graveyard of meme coins that just didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, or they're down 99% or 100% in some cases. So you have to be like super delusional. Or you're gambling and hoping that you hit the right lottery ticket and you're an early investor in dog with hat or whatever. Like
Yeah.
that's what they're hoping for is to get lucky rather than be good, right? And this is the thing that you start recognizing as you get into Bitcoin is that it's not about getting in early, right? Good. That's what all of these altcoins are selling you. It's about doing the work and saving money, right? This is saving, doing whatever you're good at, and this is how healthy society functions: is that everyone does what they're really good at that provides the most value to other people. Everyone wants to make lots of money, and then you store it, right, in something that's not debased or stolen from you. That's the best sort of society because there's not a lot of people that are stealing or grifting or trying to scam other people in zero sum games. Everyone's playing a positive sum game that builds. But if all these people are playing negative sum games like these meme coin trading things, then you get a destructive civilization, and you start, taking trust, which is a capital good, out of society, and then you next thing you know, you have sort of a chaos. You have a lot of grifting. Yeah, you get poorer and poorer, and in many ways, that's what's happened since 1971, and we've had 53 years of people getting poorer and poorer. People just don't want to admit that, right? Like, most families have two parents working. Used to be in the 50s and 60s, you could just have one breadwinner, and that was fine. But they sell it to us as if it's like women's liberation or something. No, you're being gaslit. You're just getting poorer. You can't
Yeah.
afford the things that you actually need with one salary.
Yeah, like you can't so our generations are you millennial or Gen X?
I'm actually Gen X, but yeah.
Oh, Gen X. Okay. Yeah, so but either way, millennials, Gen X, even Gen Z, they're working I think Gen X are the first ones that actually got hit by this. They're working
Mm,
way more to sustain the same lifestyle, exact same
mm,
lifestyle as their parents, as their grandparents, and it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. Gen Z, Gen Alpha are going to be working 75-hour weeks minimum just to
mm,
have a condo,
mm.
right? A condo that they rent. They don't even own it. They have to rent it. And that's the scary thing. That's where the world is going.
Yeah, that's the trajectory in fiat terms, and it's not just sort of like normal folks or whatever. I mean, I used to work for a healthcare software startup, and one of the things we realized is doctors work way more to keep up the same lifestyle. They used to have, I don't know if you remember this when you were a kid, but they used to have this reputation of going golfing all the time, right? Like, doctors
I remember that.
golfing, Wednesday morning or whatever. They don't do that anymore. They have to,
Yeah.
like, take way more patience to have the same amount of money. This is why you see your doctor for 8 minutes in a 30-minute appointment, because likely there's like two other appointments that he has triple booked. So he's like going back and forth to make as much money as possible, because a lot of doctors are getting squeezed. And why are they getting squeezed? Because, there's a giant rent-seeking class called health insurance companies that take a significant chunk of the healthcare stuff. They're essentially, insurance companies are very similar to banks in that they extract value from everybody else, without really providing much, which is why I call them rent seekers.
Hmm.
But you look at a lot of other industries, right? Like, colleges, the people that are actually teaching, like, they are like, and they're usually like postdocs or grad students or whatever. They get paid nothing,
Yeah.
like nothing, right?
Yeah.
And why? Because they're supporting the administrative bloat that's on top of them. And you have your diversity coordinator and safety administrator and this and that, and you have like a tremendous amount of bureaucrats that you have to support. Well, who gets squeezed? It's the people that are actually doing the work. So you had this phenomenon where the people that are doing the work get paid less and less, and of course we're getting poorer and poorer because you have to fund all these people that are really doing nothing and having sort of like a negative effect on civilization.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a great chart on WTF happened in 1971. I actually just pulled it up here. This shows like this chart just illustrates your point perfectly, right? The people who are actually doing the work, they're getting nothing. They're
Hmm.
getting squeezed, right? They're having all of their they're productive. They're still doing the work, but they're just
Well,
not
they're
getting
doing
any
more
money.
work, right? Like,
Right.
they're doing way
Exactly.
more work
Yeah.
for the same price. Yeah.
They're doing three times the work, right?
Yeah.
That's the crazy part, and they're getting nothing out of it. If you just scroll down a little bit, I think there was another chart where it shows you I just opened it, but it shows you that the top 1% are getting a bigger and bigger portion of the overall wealth, while the people at the bottom, they keep struggling. They keep
Hmm.
having to deal with all of the costs that are associated. They're essentially, I mean, if you really think about it, the people at the bottom are essentially covering two lifestyles. They're covering the
Hmm.
lifestyle of their landlord as well
Hmm.
as their own.
Yeah, I mean they're covering for all the rent seekers that are in society today, and this is the thing. In a sound money economy, rent seekers like that's they get squeezed out. And they have to because you're not competitive with too many rent seekers in your company. And if you don't know what a rent seeker is, it's basically somebody that doesn't add any value but collects rents in some transaction usually. So the classic one is some guy at a river with a big chain across the river, and a boat is about to cross, and they raise up the chain and say, "Pay me money, and then I will lower this chain." They add zero value, but they collect rent from the person that's trying to travel down the thing. It's usually associated with some sort of gatekeeping or permission giving or something like that. And there's a lot of that now, right? And this is a significant part of the economy. I think I was reading about how government workers in the United States, if you add up federal, state, and local, that ends up being something like 15% of all people, right? All jobs are federal, state, or local government jobs. They don't add anything, right? Like
Yeah.
they're not doing anything that produces things. They're actually like permission giving or rubber stamping or inspecting or collecting taxes or something like that. It's not adding anything. They don't build stuff, and that's a significant amount. And then you add up like all the HR people, compliance people in every
Mhm.
company. Those aren't adding value either. They're complying with the 15% of the workforce that works for government, and getting their permission in some way, shape, or form, or getting past their gatekeepers or something. I mean that, and then you have people that just don't do anything at companies. That hold on largely I mean that's comparatively a small amount, but I mean I think it's like if you add them all up, I think it's like over 50% of the economy are rent seekers. And you kind of saw this with Elon's acquisition of Twitter. He fired 75% of the company, and the company still ran.
Yeah.
What were those 75% doing, right? What the heck were they doing? Like they weren't adding value clearly because the site runs fine, right? Like it's not the engineers that they fired. I mean, maybe a few, but it's all the sort of weird compliance personnel, the people that are communicating with the FBI to censor this or that, or some sort of like diversity, DEI thing within the company or something. Like
Party
it's
planning
people
committee.
that, yeah, like it's literally like just, and you can ask management consultants, and many of them will go into a company and examine the entire org chart. And if you talk to them, most of them will tell you, yeah, you could cut half the people in this large company and nothing bad would happen. Like they know that most of these people are not doing anything.
Yeah.
Like the biggest way I like the most stark sort of contrast that I've seen besides Twitter is our banks, right? And Citibank, I think, has something like 200,000 employees. Okay,
Wow.
right now their market cap. Let me look it up. Actually, I don't know what the bank market cap. The current market cap is $132 billion. Okay, $132 billion. That's pretty significant. They have something like 200,000 employees. Tether
Oh, I
essentially
saw
does
this. Yeah.
what they do, right?
Yeah.
They have 50 employees, and I don't know what their latest like valuation is, but they manage at least $100 billion. I mean it's a significant portion of what Citibank is worth, I think,
Have
right?
you seen that
With
Tether is
50.
more profitable than BlackRock?
I can believe that.
Right?
Let me. l- let me see. The Tether market cap currently is 125 billion, but
Wow.
I don't know what the Tether company worth is. I mean, net equity was about 12 billion, I think. So
Okay.
it's worth at least 12 billion, probably significantly
Yeah.
more than that. Because they have a business where they're making, 3, 4, 5 billion dollars every quarter. That's a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
Uh,
Huge.
and uh, and if you do a normal PE ratio on that, then I think they're worth more than Citibank. But
Yeah.
that's a big contrast to me. You have 220,000 employees, and they essentially do the same thing as Tether, right? It's not that different, but because of all the compliance and all the rent seeking and the ability to print money and never really firing any rent seekers, you have this insane bloat. It could
Yeah.
be a much more profitable company, but they choose not to.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, I want to be respectful of your time. I have one question. I have one or two last questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, what do you think is this is something I ask every single one of my podcast guests. So,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think is the most important downstream effect of Bitcoin? So, over the next 50 years, something is going to happen. Things are going to happen to change the world. I think Bitcoin is going to be a very big contributor of this. Is there one thing that you think is going to just completely blow everything apart?
Mm. Like the biggest sort of effect
L
that I
l
can point to, something like that.
Let me give you an
Um,
example. So I
mhm,
had Lisa Huff come on here, and she
mhm,
said agency. So people have their own,
mhm,
they have their own control over their own assets. They can be capitalists essentially.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, 50 years might not be enough, but I suspect we'll have much smaller states trying
Hmm.
different things. So I think geopolitically, it's going to look very, very different because a large part of why you have such large contiguous countries is the monetary union. So once we got off the gold standard, um, it's actually quite difficult to create a new country because of the monetary stuff that you have to set up, and that's not trivial. It's
Yeah.
actually quite hard. Um, so the United States, for example, could easily be 50 countries, right, instead of one big country in a under a Bitcoin standard. I'd like to see that. I think it would be better for everyone if you have 50 little experiments on different types of governance and policy. So you're not arguing about them. You just try it in one place or another. Like is like having pronouns and transgender bathrooms and stuff good or bad? Like you can just go see, right? Like, oh yeah, this state is trying it, and this. I mean, we have that to some degree already, but bigger. Changes like different trade restrictions, tariffs, things like that. What's useful. That I think would be good to experiment on, and I think eventually we get there. I don't know if 50 years is enough, but that's what I'm expecting. To some degree, I think. Once Fiat collapses, this is sort of an inevitability where you get kind of like the Holy Roman Empire, like
Yeah.
lots of little states and people trying different things.
So do you think that Bitcoin and US dollars can coexist? I actually personally don't. I don't think that I don't think they work together.
Well, over the long term, all fiat
Yeah.
currencies go to zero.
Right.
So I mean that part is inevitable. But I mean, can they coexist for a time? I certainly think so. I mean, they do right now. Now, how long is that? I have no idea. And, it depends on sort of like the policies. There's also some game theory. If Bitcoin is really strong, then every other fiat currency has is incentivized to stay strong too, so that they keep the capital there instead of in
Yeah.
Bitcoin. So there's a lot of different and honestly, this is why a lot of altcoins have reasonable monetary policies if you look at them, right? Like instead of, loosening like crazy, like all fiat currencies do. They know that Bitcoin's the main thing that people will switch to. So, they're a little less inclined to print as much money as they could if they wanted to.
Yeah, then over time, I guess you're right. They are coexisting right now. But I mean, let's
Hmm.
say if Bitcoin is, I think eventually Bitcoin's going to hit $10 million. It's going to hit $100 million. I don't know what the real value will be at that point, but do you think that people will still be paying for things in dollars at that point? I mean, I don't think that because if it hits $100 million, that means that the US dollar's value has probably dropped
Yeah, I
significantly,
mean, yeah, I
right?
mean, it might not exist, or we're in the midst
Yeah,
of hyperinflation or
that's
whatever.
it. Yeah,
I mean, there are legal tender laws that require you to pay in dollars, at least in the United
right.
States, and that'll probably get enforced somewhat. But you get into situations, and this is something that I learned in Lebanon. Um, where if you have a significant portion of government workers in your economy, they accelerate the hyperinflation because
Yeah.
they can't afford anything, so they demand raises. They get the raises that and of course it's newly printed money, not collected taxes, and they spend that into the economy, causes more inflation, which means that they can't afford it. They demand more raises and so on. They go into that sort of like cycle. Um, but at a certain point, a lot of them just sort of like say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to do my job," right?
Yeah.
And and if you have legal tender laws and there's somebody in charge of enforcing that and they're not getting paid very much, they're not really incentivized to go and enforce it. Or even if they are, they can be bribed fairly easily because they're getting paid so little. So it ends up sort of collapsing at a certain part of that death spiral. It gets very, very easy to just sort of like forget about it. So yeah, like there are legal tender laws and things like that. At a certain value of I mean, I think it'll already be dead, and people will be demanding Bitcoin instead of dollars. Um, how long that will be, I don't know, but I expect it to happen at some point. But US will
Yeah.
probably be the last one. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And okay, I have one last question for you. What are some we're in the midst of a bull market. I think we're going a
Hmm.
lot higher. Actually, I have two questions. What do you like talking about price targets at all?
I mean, I that's not my expertise, so
Of
it's
course.
hard for me to
It's just for
say
fun.
anything.
Just for fun.
Yeah. Mhm.
What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to be the peak for this cycle?
I mean, I think the last cycle went from 19 to 69, something like that. So it went 3.5x.
Yeah,
So what, 69, three times 3.5, that's like 250-ish. So
250. Okay, that's
yeah, I mean,
reasonable.
I think that's a conservative estimate.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Okay, and one last question. I have my audience here is constantly trying to learn. They're trying to learn more about Bitcoin. A lot of them they're Gen X and they're millennials. Some of them
Mhm.
are baby boomers as well. Do you have any insights, any thoughts on how they can navigate this bull market? Just like what can they do? Just final tips, maybe things
Mm.
to look out for.
Well, just earn and save in Bitcoin. Like don't worry
That's
too
it.
much about the price action. If you're
That's it.
trying to trade, then I think you're playing the wrong game.
Yeah.
Like you just want fair value for your labor or however else you earn your money. It's not about playing these zero sum games, and I think that's the wrong mentality. I think if you after you've been in Bitcoin a while, you realize like the whole point is so that you do the thing that earns you the most money, which in a sound money economy is whatever the most value you're providing is, and use that to save. And once you've saved, you can go and fulfill whatever dreams you might have. And like a lot of people I find don't have many dreams. Go, and
No.
if you don't have them, like go make them up. Like now's the time. It's okay. Like I want to go and buy a boat, or I want to I want to start a college or I want to travel, whatever it is, like go have some dreams that are worthwhile and go do them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I like how you said I like how you essentially said price doesn't matter. Price is
Hmm.
irrelevant at this point. Just accumulate. Eventually, this is going much higher. Just get
Hmm.
as much as you can. Get your share. Get your fair share and more if you can. Buy some for your family and friends. You have to, right? Because a lot of people are not, not.
That's a respectable goal as well.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how much they'll appreciate it if you just gift it to
yeah,
them, but
of
yeah,
course.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Hey, Jimmy, I really, really appreciate your time. I wanted to have you just plug yourself. Can you give my audience, I know you create amazing content, so I want my audience to get more knowledge from you. You have your book, Fiat
Hmm.
Ruins Everything. Do you have any of your other books that you've written near you?
Yeah, they're near me. Just
Oh, perfect.
well, I'll just tell
It's
you.
okay. Gee,
It's
yeah, just tell us. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's Programming Bitcoin. That one's
Amazing.
published with O'Reilly. That's for programmers, obviously. You have the Little Bitcoin book, Thank God for Bitcoin, Bitcoin and the American Dream, and of course, Fiat Ruins Everything. Those are all available on Amazon. You can look me up,
Perfect.
Jimmy Song, on there and buy them there. My main social media is X and Noster, and you can find me at Jimmy Song on X and just search some people on Noster and you can find me. It's a little more complicated because there's an NPub associated. My website is programmingblockchain.com. I have a YouTube channel, podcast. Bitcoin fixes this, and I've been um, interviewing people, like sort of trying to figure out what's next. After you have Bitcoin for a while, it's like, okay, what other things that do we need to worry about or think about and do? So that's the focus of that podcast. So yeah, those are it.
Awesome. So I'll link your Twitter in the description. I think that'll be really valuable for a lot of people. I like looking at your Twitter. I like you looking at your tweets because I think you have some, I guess, polarizing content on there, but I like it. I like it because it makes me think, right? It
Mm,
makes the things that you say. So I don't agree with everything, but it
hmm.
makes me think, right? And
Mm.
that's the point. That's the point of Twitter. Thank you so much for your time, Jimmy. I really, really do appreciate it. That was a great conversation.
Thank you.